So we've changed our stroke technique a little from the previous years. So the new parts of our technique, in the beginning, we were copying what the Tahitians were doing. And so I made a video analysis examining what their stroke and what they were doing in their stroke. Since then, we different emphasis, and it is always on the top hand. And I internalize things. We all hear things. Like, I say things in different ways to try and get people to assimilate what I've said, because I say things one way, I look at the person, they demonstrate what I just said, and they're not doing it. And then so I say it in a different way, and they're not doing it again. So I'm trying to think of different ways, because we all assimilate words differently. Okay? Well, one of the things that I assimilated differently was pushing with the top hand. Okay? I always thought that we come out, we set, and we push with the top hand, but that was it, right at the top. Well, the thing I didn't realize, I thought, okay, well, when I sit up, I'm pulling with this bottom hand. And if I sit up, I can feel it as I pull with that bottom hand. Okay? But what we've discovered this year is we want to take out all up and down movements in our technique. So originally, there was the hinge. We hinge further. I mean, we hinge when we go forward with our arms straight, and then we hinge again into the water. So we're taking out that second hinge part. Okay? We're taking out the part where we come back on the release and we bend our elbow to lift up. We're no longer doing that. We're pulling it like a sword out of a scabbard forward like this. Anytime you have an up and down movement, you're pressing the canoe into the water, slowing yourself down. Now, the thing I was getting to about the top push, that I internalized as pulling when I sit up. Okay? When I sit up, I'm pulling with that bottom hand, but no, that's not what we're doing. We're pushing with that top hand. When you set your blade, it's like in cement, and it doesn't move. So we're pulling the canoe to the blade. But actually, pulling is the wrong word. We're pushing. Okay? So our bottom hand is straight, and it's acting as a pivot for our paddle. So our paddle comes into the water at an angle. The blade is buried, and then we're coming over with this hand. This hand is already on the top of the paddle. But as we're turning our shoulders, come in, and then we turn, pushing the top of the handle. And that's what gives us the initial acceleration. Once the blade is straight up and down, the handle on a double bend, the top hand may be forward when the blade is straight up and down in the water. Okay? But now we're sitting up, and as we sit up, we're pushing on the top hand, not pulling on the bottom hand. It's a very subtle difference, but it does make a difference. If you sit up and pull with that bottom hand, you're pulling yourself down in the canoe. A lot of people complain about their butts hurting or their legs going numb. That's the cause. You're pulling down. So your hand is at an angle like this. There's going to be some energy up and down because if you're pulling with this bottom hand. And that puts pressure on your butt, which compresses nerves, makes your legs go numb. I know, I've done it for years, and I was always wondering, what the hell am I doing to cause my butt to go numb and hurt so bad at the end of a paddle? Well, since I've been doing this properly, where I'm pushing, and now we've got speed with the canoe, okay, and all we want to do is maintain contact with that water. With the top hand, I don't know, you may call it bracing, but it's pushing, really. Pushing until it naturally breaks, and then you just continue downward with it. But it's a natural thing. it's not pushing down. It's just that when you get to the point where it's at your knee, the water will just carry your blade, and then you just release. And your hand comes back, all the way back behind your hip. And that's the point where the paddle and the blade is out of the water. It happens naturally. And you've turned your shoulder back a quarter turn. Okay? So that's the most important thing that we've changed, is the pushing of that top hand and not pulling with the bottom hand. If you're in a canoe, like on Thursday, I noticed we were just having an easy paddle back, everybody on the same side coming back, and I've just emphasized that you want to push with the top hand, and I noticed that their canoe was bouncing, the other canoe was bouncing. The ama was bouncing like this, okay? Well, they reverted back, okay? They're pulling with the bottom hand, and you often do that when you get tired. Or we've been trained, like I've been paddling now for 14 years, for 13 years of those years, I've always been thinking, I'm pulling with that bottom hand, okay? Just this year, my butt has stopped hurting, you know? So one of the other changes is that we're pushing our feet forward. The force is always forward on our feet, not down, okay? So you gotta feel that pressure in your foot. That's forward pressure. I never said that before. You know, I just said you want to feel the pressure in your feet, but I didn't specify whether it was downward or forward. But once I did that in a canoe, you could really tell the difference. The other thing is that you want to use your upper body momentum. Now, last year I broke up the stroke into 4 parts, and the first part I called the hinge, because we were trying to mimic what the Tahitians were doing in that video analysis. But what I've discovered is that second part of the hinge, even if you have your head forward, you're going to press the canoe down. So we're not, I don't really like to call it the hinge anymore. You are hinging a little bit as you bring the paddle up from the return. And the way you have to use that upper body momentum as the first force forward. So I don't even have to touch the ground to make this canoe or your canoe or this paddle simulator go forward. You just have to have the proper technique, and that is to keep your hand low when you come up, and you feel the push forward on your foot. Now you have to lock your knees. If you allow give, like even though there's very little room for give, any give, like you just saw my knee flex, any give like that is going to absorb the force that you're putting into the water. So keep your knees locked. And then when you go forward, it's just going forward like this. Now you want your hand, your arm as straight as possible when you go forward. And you see how the momentum takes shape, pushing this forward. That's the first part of moving forward in the canoe. People matching themselves for that initial force. Okay? Bottom hand at the gunnel. Also, that's another thing that in the previous videos of the Tahitians, they come down, their hand is all the way at the hilt of the blade, and they're touching the water with their bottom hand. And then they come along. Now they're pretty straight in that they come back, but mostly what I see is that they're coming in, coming up, and then collapsing right here and coming back. We're eliminating the hinge, so the gunnel is about right at my knee level. You want to keep your hand right at the gunnel. Okay, so when you come forward, you have the catch, and now you push with the top hand, and now you're pushing, and then it just naturally gives. Okay, but your hand, your bottom hand, stays at the same level the entire time. If you go forward and you come in and you push this handle too far and collapse it immediately, you're going to sink down. Your hand will sink down into an arc and come up in the back. So that's that up and down. So we don't want to have that up and down of our bottom hand. You want to come all the way through, keeping it like that. If you have to bend your elbow at the back, then bend it. But don't go through with the top part and then allow your hand to sink down and then come up. Okay? It's got to be all the way through, all the way through.
So, Tro, so maybe instead of the word hinge, when you say hinge, people want to do this.
Right.
It's not really a hinge, but it eliminates the hinge thought in your head.
True. Okay. I'm making a new video and that's what I'll do. So it's the reach. Okay. And you got to point your shoulder forward. That directs the energy. And you see the Tahitians do this. This is one of the things we're keeping because they're developing that initial momentum forward. The short stroke. So as we've said all along, the short stroke is just the top part of our stroke. Okay? So when you come forward, you're sort of pushing this hip forward. And what you're preparing, I call that cocking and loading your hip. Okay? So you're pushing the hip forward, your knees are locked. Come in. Now this is just on the very first stroke of the short stroke because you're starting from the release. Okay? Come forward, your hips are locked, your knees are locked. The other thing I forgot to point out, when we go to the catch position, what we said in our past was that we're hinging into the water. We're no longer doing it. On the catch, we come forward and we just drop our arms into the water. Okay? And then we hit, and then we're out for the short stroke. And then to hit again, our hip is now unlocked, okay? Or not locked and load is what I'm saying. And then to hit again, we do this. Come in. Now there, I dropped my body, but I meant to just drop my arms. We hit again, and we're out. But we don't come back. Hit again, come to your knee. Keep doing that, but you hit again, then out. Then lock and load your hip again, in again, then out. Then